Yeah. Okay. So there's a referee, or somebody who actually
in a way.
takes
Yeah,
care about. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense. Now, imagine the business war game from the perspective of a manager. So, how is it? How does it play out for them? How do managers typically react, for example, when you tell them, "Hey, tomorrow you're going to engage in a role play"? What does their day look like? Do they know in which team they are prior to starting the day? How would I experience a
Mhm.
business war game as a manager being invited to it?
Well, one would usually try to, like weeks before, have like a 30-minute call with the
Mm.
participating managers to kind of introduce the concept so that they are aware of that, and also take a bit away of the concerns one would have around, playing something over the course of the day or being in a role play simulation. And then usually, for me, the ideal setup is if I can have something like an evening before the war game where everybody comes together and they can get together in their groups and like have a first discussion. Okay, tomorrow will not
Mhm.
going to be the usual manager and the company. We're going to be in a way in a different company, and that they kind of go to bed with that idea and wake up in the next morning and say, okay, this is now going to be a different day. And then that is in a way supported with having a room with the material in there, sometimes with the logos being on caps or even on
Mhm.
t-shirts, so that they kind of feel attached to that company they're assigned to. And then it really starts in the morning with, okay, here's your analytical material. This is your breakout room with some marketing material. Maybe have a look at a few of the videos to get an idea of the tonality, also of the culture, and
Mhm.
then start working together. And then usually what happens is that it is in a way very intense day of discussions around trends, scenarios, futures, strategy,
Mhm.
and competition. And it usually is something that I, as a participating manager, really, really enjoy. So usually time flies by really, really quickly, and engaging in that. And of course, most of the time, the participating managers want to win. They want to be in the winning team. Doesn't matter then even more if they're competing against their own company or not. They want to be in the
Yeah.
winning team.
Yeah. And what does winning mean? Is it literally putting the other company out of business? Is it like I want to strive for a checkmate? I want to make sure they lose as much market share as they have. Is it that quote unquote simple of a goal? Is it more complex?
It it,
What is it?
it in a way depends on the setup. Can be also about
Mm.
what team is being more innovative than the others, but it can also be the one that is
Okay.
gaining more market share than the others. It depends also a bit on what type of effort has been put into maybe developing a quantitative model
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
evaluates the results and gives the feedback. But it is, I would say that that idea of winning is more something that kind of is motivating. Um, it, I think it plays a certain role in the simulation, that say, okay, that team did in particular well, maybe even given that they had a difficult competitor they were simulating. Um, but then at the end, it is really bringing together the diverse perspectives. But the momentum of winning is something that motivates. Uh, the participating managers.
Yeah, of course. Is there any I don't know, descriptive or prominent case study that you could share? One specific example where we could, what was the goal? How did the days or day look like? Um, Anything you can guide us through a story
Yeah,
of a specific war game.
I mean, from an academic perspective, the difficult issue is that nobody really wants to talk about a business war
Of
game to
course.
anybody from the outside, because it's really about, in a way, the strategy. I mean, the own strategy being challenged all the time in such a simulation. I still find one case study really, really nice, which has been published, and that's the one of Swiss Air. And I mean, the story there is an interesting one, because Swissair not only, when bankrupt was then sold to the German Lufthansa, and that in Switzerland back then caused quite some debate, and a lot
Mhm.
of was published on that. But that's an interesting case, and can walk you through that uh, briefly. So, I mean, what happened in the 90s is that the massive deregulation of the European airline industry, which led to the creation of the alliances we know of today. Um,
Mhm.
and Swissair back then had created a small alliance and was thinking about, so how should they move forward? Should they join a larger alliance like the Lufthansa Star Alliance? Should they remain independent? And the question also was for them, what would be critical success factors in the future? Um, but also preparing the own management in a way for change to be able to compete maybe with the larger alliances. And they simulated the industry for the next 10 years in 3 iterations, as I just described it, and 10 years into the future. And the outcome obviously was that the participating managers felt that Swissair should join one of the large alliances. The One World
Mhm.
Alliance seemed to be the choice they had back then from British Airways. And it turned out that the CEO more kind of had a perspective on saying, okay, no, the own qualifier group, the own alliance of Swissair was the right approach. It's more a branding, marketing issue, and felt actually more that the strategy he was convinced of should be the one they should go forward with. And it turned actually out that the participating managers anticipated quite well the dynamics of their industry, and then a few years later, Swissair actually went bankrupt because they had the wrong strategy. And I think it's a in the twofold perspective, it's a nice case because it kind of, on the one hand side, emphasizes that leadership should, in a way, embrace the opinions and respect the opinions they have with their management team. But on the other hand, that the simulation did a quite good job in roughly anticipating how the industry would further evolve.
So, in essence, it was a wrong decision by the CEO back then to stick to the strategy. So why did he engage in the business wargaming in first place? Just to ratify that his strategy is already the best, or
It seemed in hindsight that it was more about ratifying and like
uh
having the momentum of having everybody together and saying, okay, this is the right path.
Mhm.
And then that simulation obviously developed differently, and it came to a different conclusion in a way.
Interesting. That makes me think of the what do participants actually learn? What are some of the most impactful lessons that they learn? For example, by the managers, maybe also the CEO, depending on the participants, obviously. Does it change? Does it at least have an impact on their approach to the strategy, the tactics they use, their leadership, even based on your experience? Do you think they leave the room as a different person, or at least a different manager than they entered the day?
I believe so, and I think what they really learn is uh, changing a perspective on the own industry, on the own company, and engaging deeply with changes in their industry, like and that deep engagement with trends and maybe even scenarios. So I think that is, in a way, a change, and having that interaction with their colleagues over the course of the day, I think that really that makes a difference.
Because I, think if you go into a business war game, you're very much convinced of, maybe their own strategy you have, depending if it's a corporate strategy or just a, product strategy or whatever is part of the business war game. And then you find out through engaging with, some of the trends and maybe scenarios you've put together, and maybe even a quantitative model that you can, of course, it's a model, and models always are not perfect, but they can help in understanding some aspects, and maybe some dependencies. So you go out and say, well, actually, this is interesting because I thought we have the best winning strategy, but if competitor A makes a certain move and competitor B is kind of maybe just buying competitor A, and then they join forces, and then our strategy is basically worthless, or at least not a winning strategy anymore. Now, this probably leads to a realization, and maybe a shift in strategy. Over the years, have there been any unexpected outcomes you've witnessed, like a surprise, something you say, "Well, I didn't know that that was coming."
You mean on how a war game evolved? In,
Yeah, for example, did somebody start to cry? Something very unexpected where you say, "Well, Jesus, I never thought this is going to happen."
Well, I think I had several times that moments that, for instance, participants would say, you know what, we've been focusing on competitor A all the time, but to be
Mm,
honest, I don't think that A is really the issue. We'll be able to deal with
mhm.
A, but if B or C evolves, or if we have like a completely new type of competitor, this will hit us really hard. I think those are kind of the revelations that I found several times really interesting. That there was that moment that I said, okay, now we better understand maybe also to what to focus on.